safer, and I think on balance they're probably right about that. Now, there will be some of you out there who probably drink a case of bottled water every few days. I'm talking about the small plastic bottles and, say a case or a package of 24 of those. In my own case, I would consume a case of bottled water if it was 24 of those small bottles, maybe over 2 years. Don't get me wrong, I like cold water. I do not like drinking warm, like room temperature water at all. So I would either drink really cold water out of the fridge or put ice in it. But I'm very happy with tap water. It is safe. It tastes fine to me, even Toronto water, which I drink all the time and think it tastes great. And it's not a ripoff. That is an important point I make there. It's not a ripoff. I think bottled water, and we're going to have somebody on from Bottled Water Association in just a moment. I think bottled water, especially those small plastic bottles of non-carbonated water, I think it's a ripoff. The carbonated, I understand. They have to go to the trouble of putting the gas in that and so on and so forth. But I think non-carbonated bottled water is a ripoff. Why would you pay more for a half liter of that water than you would pay for refined gasoline, which we think is a ripoff? We think gas prices are a ripoff. And, in the water, there's not even a tax grab in there. At least with the gas, when it's a ripoff, you can say, well, it's the government that's partly ripping us off. With the water, which is more expensive per liter than the gasoline, there's no tax in there, really, a little bit, maybe. The other thing is quality control, and I'm sure they engage in rigid quality control with respect to the bottled water, but we're just not as familiar with it. When it comes to city water, we know they have great big plants, and they inspect it like hour by hour by hour by hour, and so on. They spend a lot of money doing that, and we know that in the light of things happening like Walkerton, we take even more steps to test more water more often. We don't know as much, and that's, of course, because the tap water is distributed to everybody, and we rely on the government to do that. How do we know what the deal is with respect to bottled water, when it's tested, how often, by whom? And I started thinking about all this when I read this story about this blue glass water, which supposedly comes from Caledon, and it's associated with the Caledon Clear Water Corporation. And it was just an interesting story in that I'd never really heard of water being recalled. You hear about meat and, all kinds of things, yogurt and this and that, but not water. And they said that the initial health problem came in the Peel area where they had a complaint. We tried to get the medical officer of health to come on and talk about what a complaint would consist of. Is it somebody who said it looked funny, it tasted funny, it made them sick? I don't really know. But what they ultimately determined was that this water was heavily contaminated with bacteria. Now, when I hear those words used by a medical person, I kind of say to myself, well, they're not talking a couple of pieces of dust in there. It's something a lot worse than that, but we don't know much more in the way of detail about that. So having made a few disparaging comments about bottled water, and that's just me saying I think it's kind of a ripoff. I don't find the tap water taste anything other than good. I always order tap water in a restaurant. That's just me. But having said all that, I wanted to make sure I gave equal time to the bottled water people, both in terms of talking about what they do to ensure quality control and also talking about why it isn't a ripoff if she wants to address that. I don't want to force her to do that. This is a personal view on my part. Elizabeth Griswold is the Executive Director of the Canadian Bottled Water Association. She's not going to be very happy with me, but it's Friday, Elizabeth. We got to just let loose here. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you, John?
Good, thanks. So could you talk a little bit about quality control and what goes on in the bottled water plants? I'm talking generically about all the different plants. What do they do? People kind of seem to sense they know the water's tested, I think, like several times an hour when it's the big plant that supplies the city water. But what are the people who are making the bottled water? What do they do?
Well, the members of the association, the Canadian Bottled Water Association, are required to meet a quality assurance program that's outlined in our model code. And the model code is just one of many different types of technical training that we offer to not only the members but to the bottled water industry in general. And our assurance program is more extensive than requirements from the federal and provincial regulations. Now, I do want to state that the company you mentioned that's been in the media recently is not a member of CBWA.
So if they were, with your members, you obviously it's in your interest because the association comes to be a laughingstock. Otherwise, that you actually go around and seek assurances from and have seminars and check up on the members to make sure they're adhering to all these standards, whereas you can't obviously do that with somebody who doesn't belong.
Correct, and but we keep in touch very closely with Health Canada and Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and if there's any issues when we get consumer complaints, I'm legally required to inform them to contact Health Canada and Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like when you have certain kinds of, illnesses, you have to call the health people. You have to call when you get a complaint and say there was a complaint, the water was made by so-and-so, and they either can decide to follow up or not, depending on what it is.
Yeah, and I have no information on this Blue Glass Water Company, which is also known as Caledon Clear Water. I really had no information, but I have done quite a bit of research. I spoke with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, which handled this release yesterday, and I asked them specifically if they could identify what the bacteria was, and my question very specifically, was it a pathogenic or non-pathogenic bacteria? And his response back to me was, I can't definitely answer your question about whether the bacteria in the Blue Glass Water Company was pathogenic or non-pathogenic. There was such a high level of bacteria in the sample, it is not possible to accurately detect whether it was E. coli or coliform present. Now, I've spoken to water testing specialists, and they asked to get back with them, find out what method they used to test. And there is no reason why they could not have done a sensitivity or a more detailed test to confirm the presence of E. coli or coliform. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and my assumption is, from the little bit of information we're getting, is that this particular bacteria is non-pathogenic, completely harmless to the humans.
Yeah, because it's, when you read heavily contaminated with bacteria, you automatically conjure up notions of something that's real bad. But it could be.
It made a great headline, didn't it?
Sure, and it may well mean the water looks cloudy or something with that bacteria in it, or it's of color or some such thing. But you're saying wouldn't have killed anybody or caused them to become ill to drink it. And I raised that myself when I said we didn't know if anybody ever became ill. Can I just give you? I wanted to give you, to be fair, 60 seconds here in the time we have left, just to sort of address. Look, people will pay whatever the market price is for something, and lots of people are out there. I see them carrying these cases of water out of the supermarket, so I know they're buying it, so obviously they don't think it's a ripoff, but I think bottled water that's more expensive than gasoline is a ripoff. But go ahead.
You know what, John, I understand what you're saying. If you go to a lot of the activist websites, they compare bottled water to the price of gasoline. AC Nielsen, which is a market research firm, very reputable in Canada, follows the bottled water market. And according to their records, 2012, the average price of a liter of bottled water was 36 cents. I wish I could pay 36 cents for a liter of gasoline.
Well, you've made that point, and I'm glad I gave you the chance to do so. And if that's what the price of it is, then it's less than I thought it was. But I guess you have to sort of look for that. But I appreciate your spending time on a Friday afternoon talking to us and maybe enlightening us a bit as well with respect to this particular issue that's made so much news coming out of Caledon, and not a member of your association. But Elizabeth Griswold is the Executive Director of the Canadian Bottled Water Association. Thanks for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, John.
Okay, so we're coming up on 5:45 here, and after we check on the traffic, it's going to be time for the roundtable.